Brand Bootcamp. This is not Brand Bootcamp. This is mini Brand Bootcamp, the long one we're not doing today. But in order to get this one to fit, I'm going to speak every third word just in order to make it work. What I really want to talk about is how you can be a hero to your company. Now, first of all, I'm going to talk about examples that are big companies because you've heard of them. If I talk about examples of little companies that you never heard of, you'll say, ho-hum. But every one of these little companies was a big company once before, and some of them not very long ago. So everything I talk about is going to apply to your company. I mean, every company. If you're a service company, you're a lawyer, accountant, whatever, you have a branding issue. And I can tell you, number one, and the worst branders are doctors. I know them. Number two, lawyers, and then three, accountants, although we're fighting for 2 and 3. So to get you started, I'm going to give you a problem. One that one of you knows. So don't give the answer. All right, McDonald's in 1996 was bringing out a product which they've tried multiple times to bring out. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called Arch Deluxe. They spent $250 million bringing out this hamburger product. And what it is more vegetables, less beef for those of us who shouldn't be eating them in the first place. Didn't stop me, but nevertheless, how many people remember Arch Deluxe? Not too many. That was not a very good expenditure of $250 million. What went wrong? If you don't know the answer to this, then you have a branding issue. Well, here is the question. The Fallon agency, Minneapolis agency, did this commercial. It ran one time, and it was pulled off the air by the people at McDonald's who knew better. They knew it was a fatal branding mistake. And I want to know if you see it. They pulled it off the air. I didn't see it on TV. I saw it at like Walker Arts Center where they were showing all the great commercials. And so here it is.
This guy is literally a pool shooter. I mean, he can play. Bam, bam, bam. This guy's good.
He knows what he's doing.
Wow.
It's the stroke. It's unmistakable. If you play pool, you know.
Really quick, really fast. It's really good.
Spin around this ball, hit this ball, and knock it in. I have no idea.
Well, where did he learn to do that?
He's amazing.
Looks like McDonald's is becoming a little more grown up. He's probably one of the best pool players in the world. Starting May 9th.
He actually is one of the best pool players in the world. But that isn't what's wrong with it, and it isn't the other thing that most people say they didn't mention the brand. It's none of those things. I'll let you think about it, and I'm going to give you the answer in 20 minutes. You're going to say, yeah, I knew that, or now I know that, but you need to know that. So let's go on and talk about brand. Brand is the most important asset in every company, at least the successful ones, and if it isn't the most important asset in your company, then it isn't working at all. Would you rather be Apple or Samsung? Samsung makes 10 times the number of phones and doesn't make as much money. I'm going for less work and more money, okay? I'm with Apple. So, all these companies for sale for so much money, every one of these was a brand deal, except one, and that was the Google Motorola. They just wanted patents so they get sued. But these are all brand deals. $1 billion for Instagram, and everybody said, way too much. First of all, it wasn't too much, and if it was too much, it was off by a factor of 2, so 500 million, I'll take it, right? Except the Snapchat guy, he wouldn't do that. All right, so let's talk about Uber. Uber, and I did this thing a few months ago, so this number is all wrong. It's more like $50 billion. Well, what is Uber? Okay, so, and I've given this speech before, and I asked people, you ever seen Uber? And some people say no. So here it is. You turn on your phone, there's an app, and you see where you are, and then there's the Uber mobiles floating around, and you pick one, and then you sign up, and Simon, who's got 4.7 stars, takes you there, it costs you 23 bucks. You give him a 5-star rating. If you give him less than a 4, he's drummed out of the Uber sphere. And you're happy. And not only are you happy, when you come out of that car, you look like this. No matter how you went into the car. And I know this because this is on their website. So Uber is worth a lot of money. Now tell me what their assets are. They've got an app, and then maybe they could attribute $1 million to that if they went overboard. So what do they got? They got brand. They have a great concept. Taxi drivers and taxi services are crap, and we're going to make something better. Great. They have a powerful, ownable brand. That's what I'm going to talk about mostly. And then they had great execution. Great execution includes being indicted for crimes in South Korea and having all the taxi drivers in Paris stop their cars in the middle of the street. These are all good things. Don't worry about it. That's just one more thing. Now, here's the most important thing you need to understand here. There are two kinds of brands. There are brand-centric companies that have in the core of their being, like Apple, we are a brand which has a very specific story to tell you, which I'll get back to later. And then there are companies that have a brand. Company with a brand and brand-centric look alike on their face, like all the companies out there in this audience, and I'll bet that 1% of you are brand-centric. Let me just ask you this. Whenever you make a business decision, do you ask the following question? Is that business decision going to build my brand? Because if it doesn't, you just gave away most of the store. All right, I need to go to this story because it's so incredible, and you know the story, but you don't know the backstory. You see something, doesn't tell you how it got there. Intel Inside. I have a list of companies here. Intel Inside was a company with a brand and is now a brand-centric company without question. Everyone in this room knows Intel. Do you know STM Electro Microconductors? Do you know SK Hynix? And I can't even pronounce all these things. These companies are just as big as Intel. They make just as much money as Intel, and you never heard of them. And if you go back to the 90s, you will never heard of Intel. You forget. But they started out where many of you are today, and they changed it. And here's what they changed. What is a computer? Is a computer the box that shines and has that pretty HP logo on it? Or is it the motherboard, which has lots and lots of chips on it and all kinds of things? I don't know what they do. Actually, I do. I'm an electrical engineer. But is it that the computer? Intel said, no. In fact, that's the computer. It's just this. The box, that's what keeps the chip from falling out. And it's not so easy to get there. And they had a very important reason why they wanted to be there. You probably never heard of these guys. AMD, Cyrex, and Intel, competitors. They made plug-compatible chips. I plug yours in, I plug in theirs. They work pretty much the same way. So you're the buyer for HP. And you can buy the Intel for $50 or the AMD for $25. Which one are you going to buy? That's Intel's problem. Until they redefined the problem. They redefined what is a computer. Because if a computer is that, and I can make you care about that, in other words, I can move my brand from being one of those geeky back office brands with a chip with lots of pins on it to one that you know works and you have no idea whether the other ones work, Intel could eliminate its competition, and they did. And they did it this way, and you know the Intel Inside story, but you don't know what it did. It's sort of a jingle for you, but it isn't that. It's redefining the computer to be the chip we sell, and we don't know what the other guys do or what the other guys make. It doesn't matter. This is the one you want. And they did it in a way where they went with the swirl logo, then they wrote this little musical tone, and they put a sticker on every one of those computers, and they made the gamers who control what computers you get, buy Intel because they focused on making the computing experience more interesting to them, not that you care at all. The result is Intel has no competition. These guys still make plug-compatible chips, and they have a hard time selling them. A brand, company with a brand, or a brand-centric company. That is how it differs. This is probably the best marketing strategy of the 20th century, so there's still opportunity in the 21st. What I'm here for is to show you that a brand strategy is a two-part program. And the problem is there are two people on the two sides, and I think I'm the only guy who crosses the great blood-brain barrier. So on the blue side, our legal ownership. It's going to come as no shock to you. If you buy a car and you didn't own it, it would be a bad purchase. But you will not see that the same thing happens in brands. And then the other thing is, what if you own it, but you don't know how to execute it? It's useless too. So brand strategy, an effective brand strategy, sits in that place in the middle. And whoever's doing your stuff needs to know both sides of this. And for many of you, this is where you're going to start. All right, brands, we know them as words. But if you're a brand-centric company, that is not where you stop. There's all this other stuff, including the package of the product, colors. These are all brands. Punching the Pillsbury Doughboy is a brand. The Honeywell is something I worked on for a million years. It is a brand, and there's a reason why it matters. When you see a house wrapped in pink, it is Owens Corning. Okay, a brown truck pulls up to your house. You can't see the logo on it, but you're delighted because that package of I don't know what is coming. So when are they going to repaint those awful, ugly brown trucks to another color? Never, and they shouldn't, and it's a brand. How many people have the willingness to identify a brand that is ownable, by the way, they're not all ownable, and stick with it for 20 years without getting bored? That's number one failing of brand trademarks. Okay, this doesn't work for everybody. I'm going to use a show of hands on this. What are these? Do you know? Do you know the brand? Ah, even a guy knows. All right. These are $700 per shoe. So that's $1,400. They cannot make them fast enough. They're Louboutins. And what is the trademark here? So I say, would you have the guts? The question is, would you have the guts to stand that high off the ground? That's certainly a question. But would you have the guts if you're a French shoemaker who's, not really very well known, and you say, you know what I think people, you know what I think women want? They want the soles of their shoes to be fire engine red. And guys, we don't get it. We would never buy these. But they can't make them fast enough. And I asked somebody who owns them, and I said, tell me what it is that makes these things attractive. Well, what is it? Fabulous was the word I got back. And, every time you lift your foot, this thing's red. And then my greatest disappointment, she said, was the color wears off when you walk on it. It's $1,400 for a pair of shoes in a way that the brand is the color is the brand. Would you have the guts to have done that? I don't think so. Green bottles, interesting shapes, round thermostats, even products, they can be ownable brands, but you have to know how to do it. Google gave up on this thing. It's a shame they did. But heads-up displays on glasses are not new. Google did not invent this. So they didn't control the marketplace, and no amount of patenting would have done it. What they had to do, and they failed to stick with it, they would have done it, is they had to get people to like wearing these and it be cool to wear one. I know you think that's crazy, but people hold phones in their hands all the time. Why not wear Google Glass, especially if it could tell you who you're talking to and you can't remember the name? So they could patent it, they can have a design patent on it, and it can be a trademark. And if it becomes the trademark and they own it, then that's the one you want to have. That's how the iPad, the pad worked first. Honeywell had patents on its thermostat was round, and they all expired, and they came to us and said, can we get more patents? And the answer is no. What can we do? Well, you can get a trademark on things if they are recognizable to the public. Why would you want a trademark on this old round thermostat? Anybody seen a Nest thermostat, by the way? And what shape is that? Round, because round has become iconic for thermostats. So they came to us and we convinced the trademark office that it was a recognized brand. Why does it matter? It's paint archaeology. You paint around the thermostat. When do the painters ever take the thermostat off and paint below it? Never. So after 20 years, the only thermostat that's going to fit in that space is a round one. And for 10 years, they won an extension, essentially. Even video games can be trademarked. So there's lots of stuff that can be protected. Now, look at this. This is a little bit different way to look at things. You know that goods and services can be trademarked. Everybody understands goods. Service is real hard for people to get their hands around. And most service providers do not brand anything other than the name. And most of it's that, the sign that's fallen off. But you can create strong brands for things that aren't goods. And here we are. I was at a Halloween party, and I met, not Flo, I met the guy who hired Flo. And by the way, he told me she never has to work again. So we somehow got to get her to sign up for another contract. Anyway, how many trademarks are on this page? 4, I think. Progressive, Name Your Price, which I'll tell you what that is in a minute. Flo is clearly a trademark, and the barcode gun is a trademark. What's going on here? If you watch some of the other progressive commercials, I know there's so many crazy ones, but insurance is delivered in a box. Why? Because people understand products. You go through the checkout counter, you got cereal, insurance, car insurance. It's not a product, it's a service. But if we make products look like services, people get them. What is name your price? Name your price is how much money do you have in your wallet? Hand it over and we'll give you whatever we can that might be legal. Crazy, but you remember it, right? It's working. Okay, so there are other ways brands can work. Brands powered by another brand and brands within a brand. As you can see, these other hotels are not Marriott completely, they're kind of Marriott light. But they use Marriott in order to get you to start thinking, aha, Marriott would not put their name on Courtyard or Residence if it didn't meet some standard. I hope it's working for them, I'm not sure, but anyway, you get the concept. Now take a look at Gore-Tex. Gore-Tex patents expired a long time ago. Some years ago, I bought a coat for $500, a raincoat. There was another one available for $100. They both had the same polyrazzmatazz that Gore-Tex has, which is a structure that lets air out and water can't come in. However, I had no idea whether the other coat worked. So I could have had a $100 coat that I get drenched in, or it worked, or I could have the Gore-Tex coat, which I knew was going to work, and I was willing to pay more money for it. And how many products are you buying on the basis that I trust the brand? Intel Inside. I'm going to buy the computer. I do not know what they use to keep it from falling out, but it should be adequate. All right, branded products give you two advantages. You need them both. One is you just get paid more. Apple products get more money all the time for pretty much the same technology that Samsung can do. It's brand. I have to go back to shoes because it's such a grotesque example. So here we have, these are products, they're not $1,700, they're $700, $800, toss-aways. However, over at Payless, we're talking $35 to $70. Where's the other $650? I agree that this one is a nicer one and a more Italian leather, but if you count up all the ingredients and all the handwork, you can't come to make up the differential. It's in the brand. Why are you leaving the money on the table? And the answer is if you haven't built a company that has brand-centric thinking, you don't get this. The other thing you don't get is momentum. So when you walk into a new prospect, if you're a service company, and I am coming from XYZ firm, and they know XYZ firm, then you're halfway home. If you go in as, I've never heard of you firm, then your first job is to sell the brand, to prove that you are worthy. Let the brand go in front of you, and then you have momentum. This is actually the brand's projection for Coca-Cola, and if we stopped selling, doing advertising for Coca-Cola at $1 million a minute, their brand will not fall off the map because they have lots and lots of momentum. For those of you who haven't believed a word of what I said, I will give you one last reason why it makes sense to be a brand-centric company, and here it is. Stuff that comes at you that you didn't see coming happens a lot. Here are two companies that happened to. BlackBerry. I owned one, I loved one, I would never touch another one. Anybody else with me on that? Okay, isn't that the craziest thing? They missed it. They did something wrong and they didn't catch it. All right, I'll give you a company that should be totally gone, and it's not. It's Dolby. What does Dolby do? Okay, remember when you were watching Lassie, and Timmy and Lassie were going to find the kid who fell down the well? Well, he was holding, Grandma put an audio tape, cassette tape in his lunch bucket. Remember those audio tapes? They had two holes in them. You put them in a machine, the stuff spun around. Well, here's how they work. Badly, really, really badly. Philips came up with this idea, but they didn't figure out how to make it work. They had terrible hiss. And if you're listening to rock music, not a problem, but everything else sounded like scraping tape against a metal head. That was a problem. Sir Dolby came up with this circuit, which I'd love to spend a few hours talking about, but basically it said, we can get rid of that hiss. And they did. So they took this cassette, which was a really great idea, and they finally made it workable. And then we thought it was all just fine. But it wasn't until Dolby put their circuitry in it that it actually worked. Great. How many of you have listened to an audio analog anything in the last 10 years. Zero, they're gone. And it turns out in digital there is zero hiss because there's no head scraping and nothing. So the company should be a complete buggy whip. It's not. It is the #1 company in music and audio for movies. How many of you have been to a movie and didn't notice this logo? What they did is they branded themselves back in the day of analog, and they said, we don't make tapes better, we make sound better. And as far as we can figure, people are going to keep talking and keep singing and keep making music, and we're going to be there. And so they shifted quietly away from analog, and they saved themselves because their brand was dynamic. It could span the disruptive change that they did not see coming. Can yours? Brand-centric, company with a brand. Okay, so if all brands are good, does it matter what brand I choose? And here's where we get down to what matters. There are good ones, and there are bad ones. Evil ones, maybe. All right, the good ones. If you are a public company, they raise your stock price. If you look at Apple's assets and you look at their stock price, you cannot figure out how the two are correlated. The brand differential. They strengthened your company against disruptive change, talked about that. They're cheaper to defend if you care about the cost of lawyers, which you shouldn't, but there it is. Okay, bad brands, they're expensive to defend, maybe impossible to defend. That means somebody can name their product or service just like yours, and then the world doesn't know yours, and yours disappears into the noise level. You don't build brand equity. And for those of you who are running small companies, you will want to sell your company someday. You aren't thinking about it now. You're never going to die. None of these things are going to happen. But if someday you decide, I just don't want to work anymore, you made a lot of money in your company, I'm just going to close it up, that's fine. If you would like the second payday, then you have to work on it now. You have to work on it yesterday, but now is good enough. And that payday is you can make your business saleable versus unsaleable. This is how it works. When you sell to a buyer, they buy something. This is pretty trivial, except when we start talking about intellectual property. So what's your company worth? Let's say you're a service business. Management? No, they're not interested in you because you're going away. Yes, you'll have a transition period, but you're going away. Are they interested in your inventory? If you even have any, it's already old. They don't want it. Your customers? Yes, they want your customers, but they don't actually want your current customers. They want your future customers because they're not going to pay you a lot of money for a company that isn't going to grow. And they really want your reputation. Well, what is reputation? It's only valuable if you can transfer to them. I've got to, and if you're a me company, which is a company that is you, and you know, it's really that company that is a company with a brand, but it's really the alter ego of the person, there is no way that can be transferred. There's another reason why you want to become a brand sector company if you're a small one, because you can't transfer yourself. You can only transfer reputation if you then convert it into some sort of intellectual property which companies can buy. It's really simple. And in business transactions, if you're not thinking that way, you're thinking on the wrong side of the transaction. So there are 3 rules of branding. They're really, really simple, and they're really violated all the time. Number 1, if no one can own the brand, it has no value. It's not a brand. What? Well, here it is. Number 2, if you don't own the brand, it's of no value. That's slightly different. And 3 is a really big one, violated all the time, not if the other 2 weren't violated as well, and that is a brand without positioning can't go anywhere. That's companies with a brand, but not brand-centric. All right, rule number 1. If no one can own it, it has no value. So brands collect brand equity. You know, Apple's very valuable because they spent years in cultivating their brand. What if they couldn't own their brand? Then this bucket would have no bottom, or big hole in the bottom, and every time they work really hard, they would lose that equity. And that mistake, by the way, is perpetual. It continues to hurt you forever. So this is a very important slide, and it says, these are strong brands, and these are weak brands, and these are fairly counterintuitive. Because a lot of people say, I need to get out in the marketplace, and I need to tell people what I do, and I need to tell them it now. And I got to tell them what I do in the brand. That is fatal. You do that, you will never sell your company because you have nothing to sell. The battery store, what do they sell? I can open up 4 other battery stores, and you can't do anything about it. I know it, I'm a lawyer. You can't do that. You have no brand. You are generic descriptive. On the far end are the ones that are really, really valuable because they don't tell you anything about what the product does. See, that's counterintuitive. And they're totally within your control. The story about Kodak. George Eastman did not invent film. Film had been around a long time before him. He invented putting film on a roll so that you could take multiple pictures and put them in a small camera. He invented amateur photography, which of course is everything until digital came along. But how did he pick the name for the company? Should he have called it Rollco or Spool-O-Matic or something that would help people understand that this whole new concept, instead of these Matthew Brady glass plates, you know, what do we got left? So he said, I like the letter K. It's going to start with a K. It's going to end with a K. And I don't really care what's in between. Now that's a pretty crazy brand strategy for a company that lasted 150 years and was the strongest brand in the world. Disruptive change got to them, but I'll take the 150 years. Whoever thought of this name was drinking heavily. But the person who thought of this one was drinking more heavily. So how many times have you bought something from one of these and tried to return it to the others and they didn't think it was funny? They should think it was funny, and they finally solved the problem, and you know how they did it. They've merged into one company that has a very poor brand name, while these guys, much more effective brand name. Great idea. I'm going to go to the airport, and I'm going to park my car away from the airport, and then I'm going to, park, and I'm going to go fly. Wow, that's what I'll call it. But then, oh geez, they can call it anything that sounds just like that. They bought them to get rid of this problem, but they haven't stopped it. There's parking this, parking that, and you get on the wrong bus. Even Park and Fly has 2 versions of Park and Fly. You get on the wrong bus all the time. If you choose a bad brand name, it lives with you forever, and you just invite the competition to take it away from you. You got $10 in your pocket, and it's 1989. And you're going to do something crazy. You're going to open a bookstore online. Who's going to buy books without putting their hands on them? So you got $10, and there's 2 domains available, and they're both $10. This one's going to be $10 forever, and this one somebody's going to pick up sooner or later, so you might as well take it. They didn't take it. Now you guys are thinking that was a brilliant move because Amazon sells mostly not books now. That's not why it was a brilliant move. It's because when you're books.com, you do not control your brand because you do not own your brand. You just own a street address. Yes, you have the legal ownership to it. Right now, that books.com is owned by Barnes & Noble, who once you click on books.com, it takes you to Barnes & Noble. It's a street address. Amazon's breakthrough is not its name. It's how you interact with its customers. You forget, it's been so long, you're so used to it. But they developed that first interactivity. I see you bought this book, maybe you'd like to see this other book. Try that in a bookstore. If somebody walks up to you, would you be okay with that? I don't think so. So they're way over there. Okay, rule number 1 was if nobody can own it, if it's not a brand, you'd be out of your mind for choosing it. Yet it's violated all the time. Why? A lot of people don't know this stuff. Number 2, if you don't own it, it's of no use to you. That seems pretty crazy. If you were to buy a car, a used car. You look it over, and then what's the first question you're going to ask the person who's going to sell you that car? You're going to ask how much it is, right? That's really not the first question you should ask. You should ask, do you own it? But you presume the person owns it. Well, in brands, it doesn't work that way. You have to ask this question, and it's not asked very often. All right, Amazon, I told you that Jeff Bezos was brilliant. He is brilliant, but he has made a few mistakes, and here is the one that could have sunk the company. How many times have you seen this bookstore? It used to be on Loring Park. This is a Minnesota story. These guys had their bookstore open in 1970, and they started to get calls in 1989 saying, do you have this book and that book? That is a lawyer's dream case. And so a lawyer, a Minneapolis lawyer, took on the case, and he called up Jeff Bezos, and he says, we love what you've done for our brand, and we're ready to take it back. And you can go out and sell books all you want. Just call yourself Quark.com. We're good. And Bezos had a terrible problem because these guys had inroads into the 14 largest markets in the United States as a bookseller sold books by mail, ahead of Amazon. So Amazon violated rule number 2. Great on rule number 1, but if you don't get through rule number 2, you still haven't gotten anywhere. We didn't check or we didn't care. We don't know the answer to that. It was litigated here, but most of the testimony is secret. I actually went to that bookstore and I helped support the program by buying this T-shirt. This is the Legal Defense Fund T-shirt. There you go. All right. All right, a teeny bit about legal stuff, and we'll skip that because, hey, you could get around that. You won't own it unless you go through a two-step process of clearance, finding out if somebody else owns it, and then registering. So in this country, we have a three-tier system: the federal system, which is the one that matters, the states that don't, and the common law, which I will refer to you as the zombies. That's what Amazon Bookstore was. They didn't register anywhere. Could have found them, but they're hard. But they come out and they ruin your day or your business or your life or whatever. So these guys exist, and you gotta find them all because they will find you. You remember Surge Cola? You don't, do you? It's back. But Surge Cola came out a day before the Super Bowl, and an injunction came out on the day of the Super Bowl saying you can't use that name. What do you do with a 30-second spot that's blank? Okay, the test for infringement, if you want to call it that, is confusing similarity. So I ask you, is Purina Cat Chow and Purina Cat Food confusing and similar? Well, I made this one up. It is obviously an infringement, but pretty clever, don't you think? Okay, now let's get to some hard stuff. Is Starbucks, for coffee, infringed by somebody opening a store called Charbucks? You're giving them the... No, the court said this was not an infringement. Stay tuned. Is Louis Vuitton infringed by Chewy Vuitton for Chewy toys for dogs, and is Pupster going to jail? I would have said yes. The court said no. And the last one is Melanza for tires confusing with Potenza for tires? And you're saying no. And the answer is yes. What I'm telling you is this is tricky stuff, and you can't do it yourself. This is high tech. Get help. Don't be the next Amazon.com. And then there's a registration process, and I won't spend anything time on that, but it does do what you got to do, which converts reputation into something you can sell. I sold a company for a client $500 million. P&G bought it. They took it away in a briefcase. It looks like this. And what they bought was something that looked like this. They bought the registration certificate, and they didn't care about anything else in the company. Okay, I will only say one thing about all this federal stuff, is there's a magical thing that when you get your trademark registered for 5 years, the zombies can't take it anymore. So somebody comes to me and says, well, I want to do this brand, and I want to become incontestable because I know my buyer is going to ask me my very first question on due diligence is, do you have a brand, and is it safe? And how can I accelerate 5 years? And that is a question that physics has not solved. So you're going to have to do it by taking 5 years. All right, very fast because there's most important thing to finish, and that's this. You can do 1 and 2 right, but you don't do 3 right, you still don't have a brand. Because brands are really not the top of the pyramid. Branding is the process of defining what connects you to their customers. And I will tell you, it's not faster, better, cheaper, even though that's the usual fallback position. If you start by building a brand by picking a brand, you've already skipped the first step, and you will never recover from it because you will never go back. When you build a brand, you start out with something about who you are and why your customer cares. And I ask you to go back into your office and do this test. Imagine the elevator speech, which is sort of a brand story. You're in an elevator with somebody you have just a passing acquaintance with, and they turn to you and they ask you, what do you do? And what you say should be your brand position. Now, that's fine, but I wanted you to take the 25 people in your company and ask them to do the same thing on a piece of paper without showing you. And I guarantee when you have 25 people writing down their brand position, their elevator speech, you will get 26 different answers. And that's trouble. That tells you you don't have a position. Lawyers, doctors, accountants, we're terrible. But you guys don't have to be. You can be cured. It's a promise to deliver. The brand is a promise to deliver the brand position. So if you don't have one, how can you promise anything? Because there's nothing to promise. You're just the sign swinging on the door. You don't have a brand. You just think you have a brand. BMW, what is their position? The ultimate driving machine. We have great engineering, right? So what is Volvo's position? Safety. Okay. By the way, it wasn't always so. I bought my first Volvo, I can't tell you how long ago, and when two Volvos met in Minneapolis, we'd pull over and say, where are you getting parts? But Volvo's position now is safety. So I ask you, who has the best brakes? They have the same brakes. They're made by Bosch. They work exactly the same. But if your position was the ultimate driving machine, your answer to the brakes is, don't need no stinking brakes. I can drive around the hazard. And if you're Volvo, yeah, we've got them. They really work well. You won't hit stuff. And every once in a while, Volvo gets excited about its engineering, and BMW starts thinking safety. And you got to tell them to stop. Get back to who you are. That is, who you are is what you have to stay with. But first, you have to know who you are. Apple's position, they never talk about it. It's very, very clear. Number one, it will be easy to use. Every one of our products is going to be very smartly designed. Its interface is going to be easy. It's just amazing that Microsoft never got the idea of copying that. They copy the interface, but they don't make it easy. Number two, also an easy thing to do, our products will be beautiful. And they are, even the watch. And so, if you buy an Apple product once, you know the promise is going to be kept because they stay to what they say. Does your company do that? Do you even have a promise? And if you have one, do you have the nerve to stay with it long enough that it doesn't get forgotten? So how do you develop one of these? I'm going to give you 2 seconds of what takes a lot of time. Develop a tagline, because taglines are short forms of positioning. They're really, really concise. If you could get a tagline that's good, you may have it. It's concise, and it's not optional equipment. So here's bad taglines. Nokia, connecting people. Dixie has the same tagline, though. Okay, Toshiba, choose freedom. Was that freedom from the NSA who caught them stealing our secret technology for submarines, or what? But these are crazy, they're cliches, they're terrible, they're not anything. These are taglines that are positions, and I want to show you some that just freak you out. First of all, the Diamonds Forever. You don't realize perhaps anymore that De Beers created the whole thing about buying diamonds for weddings. It wasn't so, and it still isn't so in the rest of the world. We are the chumps, that are still buying rocks at hugely inflated prices, and we hope they stay inflated, but they created that. Michelin, who makes racing tires, does not talk about racing tires. They talk about how you and your family are connected by a piece of rubber. But this one is the one I like the most. We all hate bugs. How do we want them killed? Dead. So how many times do they have to be dead? Now, you've been hearing this raid kills bugs dead forever, and it never occurred to you until this very moment that it was crazy and redundant and doesn't make grammatical sense, and yet you love it because you love bugs dead. So if that's what you want, that's what they'll give you. Ted, ideas worth spreading. More important than ideas I want to hear is they're so important that you're going to want to tell other people. These are powerful messages. They're relevant, important, believable, timeless, and cerebral. You get into the head. We're connected to you between Apple and you. It has nothing to do with Intel processors. Why didn't they put what do you call the people in the park? A ranger. Because rangers are being rangers, but bears, you don't want to hurt bears unless they're going after you. And this has been around 100 years. They don't even have to finish the sentence. This one is very good. It's not actually true, but it's pretty good. Everybody's worried about hacking. Wouldn't it be great if our story was the reason they can't break through is they can't find us? That's a pretty good story. This is my favorite. And the funny thing is that SurfPro doesn't even know they've landed on it because I've called them and asked them. What do? The guys in the green trucks, they come and they clean up the mess after the house has been flooded or the drain backed up. Fire and cleanup. But what they really do, and their real connection with you, is this one. What you really want is not faster, better, cheaper, and we clean up. It's you won't remember it even happened. Would you have thought about that for your company? That's the essence of great branding. All right, so that's the promise. I told you we were going to solve this problem. Well, what's the promise of McDonald's? McDonald's has two promises. Number one is consistency. We always make the same food everywhere, and you think that's bad, but they're still the biggest restaurant in the world. The second promise they have is, you don't realize this, we own your children. That is our plan, because we have heard that they will grow up to be adults. So the Fallon Agency went to the reservoir. Then they're selling a hamburger to adults in their 40s and up, and they go to the reservoir of brands that are made for children, and they violated the principle of branding, of positioning. Whatever you are, you have to stay there. So Ronald owns your kids, and everything else they do is after you. And Fallon switched them, and they nearly killed the brand. That's what went wrong. And they caught it, and they prevented it from coming out. And they made several others. He's in a pool hall and so forth. So where I started, where I'm going to end here. Legal ownership and execution have to go together, and whoever's doing it for you has to understand both. You can't violate any of those rules. And then the last rule I'll call 3A is don't quit. Once you have got this thing going, it takes a long time to have results. You won't measure them. Your buyer will measure them. They will pay you for what you did, what you stuck with. If you use color as a brand and you get tired of stuff, you've lost the brand. When you refresh a brand, you almost always kill it. Your customers aren't bored. You're bored. Stop being bored. If you want to know more, there are two things. We're doing the full brand boot camp, and you need just to write to me, and I'll tell you when we're doing it. And the second thing, this book, I just finished it last week, and it should come out sometime this spring, and talks in more detail about this. So I want to end with this, which is totally nonsensical, but tells you everything that I said in 20 seconds.
Welcome to Phone Mart. How may I help you?
iPhone 4. Where is the iPhone 4? I need an iPhone 4.
Oh, I'm very sorry, but we are currently sold out. However, we did finally get some more HTC Evos in.
What? What is that? Is it an iPhone?
No, it is that 4G phone on Sprint.
If it's not an iPhone, why would I want it?
Well, it's similar to an iPhone, but has a bigger screen.
I don't care.
The internet speeds are around 3 times faster.
I don't care.
It has a higher resolution camera on both the front and the back.
I don't care.
And it doesn't require you to be on Wi-Fi to use video chat.
I don't care.
Its battery is replaceable, as is the memory card.
I don't care.
It is highly customizable, everything from the widgets to the icons, the fonts, and even has video wallpaper.
I don't care.
The monthly bill is cheaper.
I don't care.
It can grant up to 3 wishes, even if one of those wishes is for an iPhone.
I don't care.
And that is the essence of building a brand-centric company, when they don't care about anything except what matters to you. Well, welcome or thank you for coming to Mini Brand Bootcamp. If you have questions, either see me afterwards or send me an email. You've been a great audience. Thanks a lot.